Imagine waking up in a 1970 Britain with exactly £1 in your pocket, not as pocket money, but as the deciding factor of what your family eats, whether you get to work, and how your entire day unfolds. Here's how a single pound shaped British life more than you might think. Let's start with eggs, because this one really messes with your head when you hear it out loud. In 1971, if you walked into a shop in Britain with a single pound in your pocket, you could buy 4 dozen eggs. That's 48 eggs. A dozen large eggs cost around 25 pence, so a pound covered 4 full boxes without any effort. Today it's almost funny to even compare. We've got free-range, organic, woodland, corn-fed, omega this, protein that. Prices jump all over the place, but one thing's certain, 25 pence won't even get you a single egg anymore. You'd be lucky to get a cracked shell for that. Eggs used to be a proper everyday food, cheap enough that nobody thought twice about baking, frying, or feeding a whole family without counting each one. So, now let's talk chocolate, specifically Mars bars, because they're perfect for this comparison. In the 70s, a Mars bar cost about 2 pence. That means for £1 you could buy 50 Mars bars. 50. And here's the part people forget. Those bars were actually bigger. A Mars bar back then weighed around 57 grams. The one you buy today, usually for about 89 pence, is closer to 50 grams. So not only are you paying nearly £1 for a single bar now, you're getting less chocolate for it. Shrinkflation before anyone even had a word for it. Back then, £1 meant a bag full of chocolate. Today it barely gets you 1 bar and a bit of disappointment. And then there's Christmas chocolate. The classic Roses tin. Back then, £1 would get you a full metal tin packed with chocolates, properly filled, not padded out with air. When you adjust that exact tin for inflation, that same amount of chocolate would cost roughly £16 to £17 today. And you get the tin too, the kind that ended up holding sewing kits or biscuits for the next 20 years. A single £1 could get you 2 full jars of instant coffee. And I'm not talking tiny little jars either. These were 8-ounce jars, which works out to about 226 grams. Back then, 1 jar cost roughly 50 pence, so 2 of them for £1 felt completely normal. Today, totally different story. Walk into a supermarket now and a 200-gram jar will easily set you back £5.50. Sometimes more. A larger jar can push £7 or £8 without even trying. So what was once a cupboard staple you barely thought about has quietly turned into a small luxury. Crisps are another one that feels almost unbelievable. For a single £1, you could walk out with 30 full-size bags of crisps. 30. Not these thin, half-empty packets we get now, either. We're talking proper Golden Wonder style bags, the kind that actually felt full in your hand. Each bag cost around 3 pence, which meant kids could buy them without thinking twice. Today, a single bag of crisps can cost over £1 depending on where you buy it. And somehow, despite costing more, the bags feel lighter than ever. Biscuits were another everyday thing that just made sense back then. You could buy around 25 packets of biscuits for £1. Most were priced at about 4 pence a pack, and I'm talking about classics like custard creams, the kind everyone had in the tin at home. Today, prices are all over the place. If you're lucky and shop somewhere cheap, maybe 65 pence gets you a pack. Other places charge a full £1 or more. That means your old £1 budget would not even cover 2 packs. Sometimes not even 1. Biscuits went from being a guaranteed cupboard filler to something you actually check the price on. Bread was cheap in a way that feels unreal now. A standard loaf cost around 9 pence. That means for a single £1, you could walk out of the shop with about 11 loaves under your arm. Just normal bread, everyday pricing. Bread was treated like a basic staple, not a premium item. Fast forward to today, and an average loaf is around £1.40 to £1.60, depending on where you shop. That same pound now barely covers 1 loaf, and sometimes not even that. When you compare it to inflation, bread has risen sharply. What's changed more than the price is the size. Loaves are often smaller, lighter, and packed with more air. So not only are you paying more, you are getting less bread in your sandwich. Milk is where things get interesting. A pint of milk used cost about 5 pence. For £1, you could buy roughly 20 pints. Milk was delivered to doorsteps, bottles clinked in the morning, and it was considered essential nutrition. Today, the average pint works out to around 55 to 60 pence. That is a massive jump on paper, but here's the strange part. If milk had risen purely with inflation, it should cost far more than it does now. Instead, milk has been kept artificially cheap for decades. Supermarkets use it as a loss leader, meaning they sell it cheaply to get you through the door. So while milk feels expensive today, it is actually one of the few items that hasn't exploded in price compared to everything else. Butter was another eye-opener. Half a pound of butter cost around 11 or 12 pence. That means for a single pound, you could buy about 9 packs. And here's the kicker, half a pound is actually more than today's standard 250-gram block. Today, a block of butter costs around £1.30 to £1.60. So not only has the price jumped massively, the quantity has shrunk. Butter used to be straightforward. Now it's positioned as a premium item, while people are nudged towards substitutes. When you do the maths, butter is one of the clearest examples of how everyday food quietly became a luxury. Margarine was one of those everyday staples that quietly did its job without anyone making a fuss about it. A popular brand like Stork SB cost about 6 pence. That meant with a single pound you could walk out of the shop with a ridiculous stack of margarine blocks and still have change rattling in your pocket. It was cheap, filling, and heavily marketed as the modern alternative to butter. Families used it on toast, for baking, and for frying because it stretched further and cost less. Fast forward to today, and that same type of margarine sits around 70 to 80 pence, sometimes more depending on the brand. It is still cheaper than butter, but the gap has narrowed massively. Vesta curries were peak 1970s convenience food. They were dry packet meals that promised something exciting and exotic, even if the reality was mostly rice, powder, and a lot of imagination. In 1971, a Vesta curry cost around 20 pence. That meant you could buy 5 full meals for a single pound, 5 dinners. For just £1, people loved them because they were quick, cheap, and felt modern. You just added water, boiled the bag, and suddenly you were eating something called a curry at home. Today, Vesta still exists, but it is more of a nostalgia item than a staple. Prices vary, but you are usually looking at a couple of pounds per pack now. Fish and chips might be the most shocking one of all. A full portion used to cost about 20 pence. That means your £1 could buy you fish and chips 5 separate times. Not a small cone of chips either, but a proper portion wrapped in paper. It was cheap enough to be an after-school treat or a casual dinner without thinking twice. Today, that same meal averages close to £10, sometimes more depending on where you live. That is an increase of well over 4,000%. Fish and chips has gone from working-class comfort food to an occasional luxury. Potato fritters or scallops were basically the cheapest thing you could order at the chippy. We're talking about thin slices of potato dipped in batter, fried until crisp, and sold for a single penny each. 1 penny. That means for a single pound, you could walk out with 100 scallops in a paper bag. 100. Kids treated them like snacks, adults grabbed them as fillers, and nobody thought twice about it because potatoes were cheap, oil was cheap, and labor costs were nothing like today. Fast forward to now and try ordering 1 scallop. You're usually paying around 70 to 80 pence for a single piece, and half the time it's so thin you can almost see through it. What used to be bulk comfort food has turned into a novelty add-on. Going to the pub didn't require a financial plan either. A pint of beer cost around 15 pence, which meant your pound could buy you roughly 6.5 pints. 6. You could spend an entire evening at the pub, have a proper session, and still have change left over. Pubs were local, beer was brewed cheaply, and tax levels were nowhere near what they are now. Compare that to today, where the average pint sits around £5.50, and in some places even higher. That same pound wouldn't even get you a sip. Alcohol duty increases, commercial rents, staffing costs, and the decline of independent breweries all push prices up way beyond general inflation. The pub used to be an everyday social space. Now it's a once-in-a-while treat for many people. Cigarettes are where the numbers get almost unbelievable. A packet of cigarettes cost about 27 pence. That means £1 could buy you nearly 4 full packs. Smoking was common, socially accepted, and heavily advertised, even on television. Today, that same packet costs around £14. That's an increase of over 5,000%, and it's not accidental. Massive tax hikes, public health campaigns, and plain packaging laws all pushed prices higher on purpose to discourage smoking. They were deliberately targeted by governments. They're one of the most heavily taxed consumer products you can buy, and the price difference tells that entire story on its own. This next one really shows how everyday life used to move at a completely different pace. Back then, petrol was sold by the gallon, not the litre, and a gallon cost about 34 pence. That meant for £1 you could drive away with nearly 3 gallons of fuel. Think about that for a second. 3 gallons for the price of a chocolate bar today. Cars weren't exactly fuel efficient either, but it didn't matter because filling up didn't feel like a financial decision. Today, that same gallon works out at roughly £5.80 or more, depending on prices and taxes. Fuel duty, VAT, oil shocks in the 1970s, and decades of rising demand slowly turned petrol from a background expense into something people actively plan around. Public transport also felt almost disposable in price, especially buses. A single bus journey typically cost around 5 pence. That meant your £1 could buy roughly 20 separate trips. Kids, workers, pensioners, everyone used buses constantly because they were cheap, simple, and everywhere. You didn't need passes or apps or peak pricing charts, you just handed over a few coins and got on. Fast forward to today, and a single bus journey can cost anywhere from £2 to £3 depending on where you live. In some areas, that £1 from the 70s wouldn't even cover half a trip now. Saturday morning cinema trips for kids in 1971 were almost magical, and not just because of the films. They were cheap enough that parents barely had to think about it. A child's bus fare might be 2 pence each way, and cinema entry could be around 15 pence. With a single £1, 4 kids could take the bus, watch a movie, and still have money left for sweets. That wasn't a rare treat. It was a normal weekend. Today, a single child cinema ticket can cost more than that entire day did back then, even before snacks. Add transport and food now, and it becomes an occasional expense rather than a routine outing. Sugar was one of those basics that never felt like a purchase back then, because it was so cheap you barely thought about it. A pound of sugar cost just a few pence. With a single £1, you could load up your cupboard with enough sugar to last weeks, maybe longer if you weren't baking constantly. Sugar was central to everyday life too. Tea, biscuits, puddings, baking days, jam making. It all depended on it. Today, sugar prices are still relatively low compared to some items, but the difference is scale. Packaging is smaller, prices fluctuate more, and health messaging has completely changed how people view it. In the 70s, no one was counting grams or worrying about labels. Sugar wasn't a bad ingredient. It was fuel for the household, especially in working-class homes where cheap calories mattered. That single £1 bought comfort, energy, and a lot of sweet treats without a second thought. If there's one thing that really shows how far prices have drifted, it's tea. In 1971, a £1 could buy an enormous quantity of tea bags, or loose tea if you preferred it the traditional way. Tea wasn't a luxury or even a choice. It was constant. Morning tea, afternoon tea, evening tea, and a cup offered to every visitor who walked through the door. Tea bags cost so little per unit that households bought them in bulk without thinking. Today, prices vary wildly depending on brand, ethical sourcing, and blends. Back then, it was simple. Strong, reliable tea at a price that barely registered. When people talk about how often families drank tea in the past, this is why. It wasn't just cultural, it was affordable on a level that's hard to imagine now. Here's where the numbers stop being fun and start feeling unreal. In the early 1970s, council housing rent was so low it barely registered as a weekly worry. In many parts of Britain, a family could rent a council house for around £2 to £4 a week. That usually included basic maintenance and in some cases even rates. You paid it, you forgot about it, and you got on with life. Wages were lower too, sure, but rent did not dominate your entire paycheck. Today, even subsidised social housing can run into hundreds per month, with waiting lists stretching for years. A single £1 in 1971 could cover a serious chunk of the week's rent, not just a fraction of a utility bill like it would today. The TV licence is one of those things people love to complain about now, but in 1971 it was almost an afterthought. A colour TV licence cost £12 a year, while black and white was even cheaper. That breaks down to just a few pence a day. You paid it once, probably grumbled a little, and then forgot about it entirely. Television itself felt like good value because there were fewer channels, fewer distractions, and everyone watched the same shows. Today, the license fee is over £150 a year, and people constantly question what they are paying for. Back then, it was simple. One TV, one license, and a shared national experience every evening. This next one always catches people off guard because it sounds almost made up today. Back in the 70s, owning a dog in Britain meant buying an actual dog license every single year. And the price, just over 7 shillings before decimalisation, which became about 37 pence after the switch. That meant a single pound could cover 2 dog licenses and still leave you with change for food. What's wild is that the price basically froze in time. For years, it barely moved at all. By the early 1980s, the fee was still sitting around the same amount. Eventually, the license was scrapped entirely in most of the UK. If that same fee had tracked normal inflation from 1971 onward, owning a dog legally would have cost several pounds a year by the late 80s. Instead, it became one of the rare examples of a cost that simply refused to rise, then vanished altogether. Buying a newspaper in the 70s was pocket change in the truest sense. Most daily papers cost just a few pence, often around 3 or 4 pence. A single pound could buy you stacks of papers for the entire week with change left over. Newspapers were everywhere, read by everyone and passed around until they fell apart. They were a daily habit, not a luxury. Compare that to today, where a single paper can cost over £2, and many people have dropped print entirely. Back then, news was cheap, physical, and part of everyday life. A pound did not just buy information, it bought a routine. Which of these prices shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. If you learned something new today, make sure to give the video a thumbs up. See you in the next one.